There are some who believe that the modern world continues to evolve morally. While this might be true about the general public, unfortunately, it seems not to be true when it pertains to those in power. One of the most bitterly debated subjects in classical archaeology is whether or not the Carthaginians, an ancient civilization in North Africa, killed their children for their gods. Evidence for the worship of Moloch is found in the Old Testament, with variant names Molech, Melech, and Baal, meaning Lord, and also the Phoenician theonym for Moloch is MLK. If the classical reports are accurate, Moloch represents a deity or symbology associated with child sacrifice and is fervently despised in the Old Testament. Other than claims from Alex Jones during his escapades with Bohemian Grove, no archaeological or historical evidence states Moloch or any of his variant names resemble an owl. Rabbinical tradition depicted Moloch as a bronze statue with the head of a bull and a large human body where victims were thrown into fire. The Canaanite deity has also been drawn and referred to as Kronos due to the parallel theme of the Titan god devouring his children. The ritualistic intimations of Baal and Moloch have existed for thousands of years, with modern reimaginings depicting the idol as a machine. Other controversial interpretations can be found in the origins of Freemasonry, as revealed in the Royal Arch Degree in the Rituals of Exaltation. The name of the great architect of the universe is a trinity of words: Ja-Bulan, translating to Yahweh, Baal, and Osiris, the ancient Egyptian god of fertility, resurrection, and the underworld. In Tunisia, just outside Jerusalem, children were said to have been sacrificed to Baal by being, quote, passed through fire in an area called a Tophet. According to Rashi, the single most influential commentator of the Middle Ages, the massive statue of, quote, Molech, which was of copper, and they would heat it up from underneath with its hands spread out, and they would place the child on his hands, and he would be burnt and mown, and the priests would beat drums so the father should not hear his son's voice and take pity, end quote. It's pertinent to understand the Hebrew Bible referred to Moloch worship as Canaanite idolatry, straying away from Judaism. The quotes from Leviticus are clear. But the religion of Carthage in North Africa managed to continue the Canaanite ritual. With several modifications, they birthed what the Jewish virtual library called the Cult of Moloch, creating the largest Tophet ever discovered, covering almost 4 miles with 9 descending levels. Rabbinical tradition stated, quote, the body of Moloch was hollow, divided into 7 compartments, in one which they put flour, in the 2nd through 6th they put animals, and in the 7th a child, which were all burned together by heating the statue inside. Initially, scholars interpreted these claims as exaggerated fictions stemming from Greek and Roman propaganda, who publicly shamed these cults as barbaric. But in 1923, French-led excavations at Carthage found some 20,000 burials containing cremated infant and animal bones kept in urns, inscribed with dedications to Baal and the Phoenician theonym for Moloch. They discovered long genealogical pedigrees signifying noble families, with one lineage stretching back 16 generations, suggesting the ritual was, quote, an elite practice. The University of Oxford published a study of the findings, concluding the Greek and Roman accounts were true, and not, as modern scholars believed, propaganda. They also reaffirmed previous analyses that because the ritual was so expensive, only the wealthiest and most powerful in Carthage could have practiced it. The cult of Moloch was real, an unspeakable evil carried out by wealthy humans while their society was flourishing. An author of the study said, quote, we should not imagine that ancient people thought like us and were horrified by the same things. But remember, the Greeks and the Romans were just as appalled then as we are now. Even many animals have an unquenchable desire for the safety of their offspring. Something curious happened to the rulers of Carthage long ago, what was it? And with the cult of Moloch substantiated, it would seem that anyone knowledgeable of its horror would react with abhorrence and disgust. And with most of the world having no idea about this, why then, or how then, does Hillary Clinton know about Moloch? In previous volumes, I outlined the strangely deviant website created by the current VP of Pew Charitable Trust, Tamara Luzzatto, outlining her odd, sexual, borderline torturous rhetorical proclivities aimed toward her grandchildren. The names of Tamara's grandchildren are Ruby, Emerson, and Maeve Luzzatto. In this leaked email between Tamara and John Podesta, Tamara refers to a get-together at a farm, where she refers to a heated pool. She continues, saying, quote, Ruby, Emerson, and Maeve Luzzatto, 11, 9, and almost 7. So you'll have some further entertainment, and they will be in that pool for sure. But there's more to this story than initially perceived, much more. In 2008, the website Mama's Midwives published a home birth story written by the biological mom of these children, Alexandra Tidings Luzzatto. In the story, she mentions Ruby and Emerson, then says, quote, and with the next contraction, Maeve Chaim Luzzatto arrived. This name is the female iteration of Moshe, or Moses Chaim Luzzatto, a messianic cult leader who promoted black magic in the 18th century. Critics might argue that this comparison is arbitrary and point to other notable uses of the Luzzatto name. But among all documented uses, only one has Chaim as its middle name. Additionally, the name Maeve is both a historical and pop-modern female variant for Moses. Either Alexandra named her child after an occult messiah by accident, or these families understand the significance of their names and their lineage. Consider she's also part of the Tidings family, a powerful genealogy of U.S. Democratic politicians dating back to the 18th century. In the award-winning book, The Pursuit of Heresy, author Hofen states, quote, shortly after receiving a Magidic confirmation of his unique mission, Luzzatto joined a secret circle where he would communicate with apparitions called Magids that prophesized events and offered a visionary hidden knowledge, but his ceremonies were small and were covened only between a secret cult that summoned the dead. Alexandra Tidings also comes from a line of Crowleys. Her sister, Paige Crowley, named after her mother's longtime partner Arthur Crowley, whose father was the first Crowley. Now, some might claim that any comparison to the English occultist Aleister Crowley, based solely on similar last names, would be a reach. However, the fact that Alexandra named her daughter after Moshe Chaim Luzzatto points to an awareness and preoccupation with genealogy that extends also to her elders. Additionally, Aleister Crowley's original name was Alexander Crowley, the male iteration of Alexandra. The idea this was a fluke made by powerful pedigrees is absurd. The associations couldn't be more obvious, unless of course there's evidence that people in this family have been publicly associated with the occult.
I love starting a new scroll. The feel of it in your hands, the look, so clean, perfectly empty.
It's important to understand that not all interpretations of the occult are inherently sinister. Many of us might enjoy horoscopes or getting our palms read. One mustn't devolve into the fundamentalists who went nuts over Harry Potter, right? But just as Islamic apologists obfuscate the brutality in the Quran, so too do followers of Aleister Crowley. In his book, Magic in Theory and Practice, he states, a male child of perfect innocence and high intelligence is the most satisfactory and suitable victim. The bloody sacrifice, though more dangerous, is more efficacious, and for nearly all purposes, human sacrifice is the best. Referring to himself as the Beast 666, Crowley was an individualist, arch-Satanist who created the cult of Thelema, the Grand Lodge Ordo Templi Orientis, or OTO, and a ritual called sex magic, which includes drinking mixtures of semen and blood. Even after his death, through his famously shallow and insidious libertine ethic, do what thou wilt, he's continued to gain followers all over the world, some well-meaning, others not. For several decades, the Kidley sex cult led by Colin Batley psychologically terrorized and raped vulnerable children. After being jailed in 2011, investigators found that each follower had a laminated version of Aleister Crowley's Book of the Law. One girl testified that she was taken to other homes and forced to have sex with strangers at, quote, satanic orgies. And the leader had Rottweiler dogs that were vicious to everyone. It's apparent that many followers of Crowley mirror the countless Muslim scholars who obfuscate their prophet's well-documented pedophilia. For example, this verse from Aleister's diary was so disturbing, even a Thelemite asked a forum of followers if Aleister really did this to his baby. Quote, "Her breasts itch with lust of incest. She hath given her 2-year bastard boy to her lewd lover's whim of sodomy. She hath tongued her 5-month girl and asked its father to deflower it. Thin shrieks of a young child that her beast god slave mate is torturing for her pleasure." End quote. Some said it was probably poetic hyperbole, or a drug-induced stupor, or saw no problem at all. Others said, quote, "The whole topic of pedophilia is central for coming to full understanding the eon of the child," end quote. Another said Crowley was tame compared to TV shows like Family Guy, and that Aleister may have had pedophile tendencies, but he wasn't a real pedophile. A real true pedophile is simply a lover of youth. Philia is a word meaning love, like agape or thelema. There are many others who excuse pederasty, so I'll end it with another Thelemite who said, quote, "You could argue, I'm sure, that a person who finds themselves in love with a child has the right to follow up his or her urges with action, so long as the kid was also up for it." After Crowley died, George King published The Secret Rituals of the OTO. This infuriated their new leader, Grady McMurtry, who conceded the book was, quote, "accurate enough to be used for initiations." The most significant secret revealed was a word being used during Thelema's rituals, a word that forever tethered their cult to the contentious origins of Freemasonry. Jabulan. It's important to note that the majority of Freemasons are good people, separate from the alleged malevolence of those at the top who both know and keep the secrets which established the need for the society in the first place. And it's those men who built this country, installing their own people into the most prominent positions of power and influence, so as to maintain their status and control that arguably control the world. If you doubt this, allow me to rebuke with 2 questions. How do you make sure your influence and power are represented across an entire people? In other words, how do you control a country? You build one. While none of this is evidence that Tamara Luzzatto is necessarily sinister, it certainly hints to a specific pattern of belief so often found among the most powerful in our society. One can confidently say that members of the Luzzatto and Tidings family knowingly named their children after 2 infamous cult leaders, one of whom has amassed a following of, on one hand, decent people who are merely interested in Crowley's aesthetic and counterculture variants, and on the other, pedophile apologists and sexual deviants. Which side the Luzzatto family is on, I leave up to you. Either way, Tamara Luzzatto is one of the most powerful women in the world, having worked as the primary advisor for Senator John D. Rockefeller's National Commission on Children, then as chief of staff for Hillary Clinton, per the recommendation of John Podesta, and is currently the senior vice president for the Pew Charitable Trust. She's someone you don't want to fuck with. Even the articles written about her by so-called reputable publications compare her and her husband to Francis and Claire Underwood from House of Cards. So while I wouldn't suggest poking the bear, I will continue to. See you next time.